What is your favourite TCG gimmick? This is the question that I put forward to the people, and in this video we are going to be taking a look at Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon and some other lesser known TCGs with some fun and unique gimmicks. So we're going to be starting off with Jacob BH4077. They say, I love card / mechanic that can tell a story or help build the world of the game. When art design and mechanic design overlap, it makes me pause and really appreciate how cool the card is and how much work was put into it. So what they are talking about is a non-intrusive storytelling within your game. And for a TCG format, this is what you are aiming for. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I love grinding games. I love statistics. I don't really care much for story. I do end up eventually getting into the story of games, but not at first. I have to love the game mechanics. Now, I can be a bit of a contrarian with this. I understand if people absolutely love the lore, love the story, and you may have the complete opposite opinion to me. But let me tell you a story. Many years ago, when I used to play World of Warcraft, I would sink so many hours into that game, and I would have no idea of the world or the stories that are interacting within the game, because I was all about grinding up my levels, working with the guild, doing all the different dungeons and going on the quests to get experience, not to get the story from the quests, but to get the experience from the quests. And over time, eventually, you start to take notice of the story. For me, the story always came secondary. Now, in a trading card game, I quite like trading card games because the story is usually secondary to the game. The game is all about the mechanics, the gameplay, and how they interact with each other. The story comes through lore text, through little card interactions and things like that. And Jacob gives some great examples of this that I'm going to show right now. So one of the ones they mentioned here, the Sakura Tribe Elder. In the flavor text, it says, he'd chosen a sunlit clearing with open skies and an ample brook. All that remained was to find a worthy sapling. Which is a nice little bit of flavor text there. And you kind of go, what does that really mean, until you read the effect. So, sacrifice Sakura Tribe Elder. Search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. So the whole idea is it has found a perfect spot, then it may sacrifice itself and bring forth land to that spot, a flourishing land that you can then tap mana. Very flavorful, very nice, and it paints like this little story that you wouldn't normally get in other card games. So I quite enjoy that one, and this is a good example of non-intrusive storytelling. You can play the game without knowing any background to the card. If you just want to know the card, you want to know the function of the card, bam, you can play it. But it is nice to have these little things for people who want to pay extra attention. Now, the other example that I wanted to draw from Jacob was the Thing in the Ice. And this is a little bit of a two-parter card because there are many examples to this, but I quite like this one. So you have the Thing in the Ice here. And the whole idea is that is one part of the story. What can happen is you can break open the Thing in the Ice and you get something like the Awoken Horror. The Awoken Horror even says, it serves an evidence of the ancient power of the deep. Now, obviously it's referring to its ancient power, which is subtly implying about it being trapped in the ice. Also, its name being the Awoken Horror. It is awoken from the ice. This is a nice little bit of storytelling, which once again, if you are interested in the gameplay, you don't need to know this story. But you do get a connection with these cards, especially when you play them with each other. There's an extra layer of satisfaction. So I understand that this gimmick of storytelling within the game is really nice and flavorful for a lot of players. Okay, and moving on to White Swan. Alternate or non-standard win cons like Exodia or Mill. I like how they can add a different way to approach deck building and strategizing and just kill your opponent. Now, this one, I'm not sure I completely agree with for TCGs, but when I think of alternate win conditions, I always go back to the Sid Meier's Civilization games, as they had lots of alternate win conditions, which works for, I want to say, an RTS, even though Sid Meier's is turn-based. It's not really an RTS, but it's an army controlling game. It's a unit game. So some of the alternate win conditions that you can achieve in Sid Meier's is things like science, culture, domination, religion, and you can take all of these approaches, and if you reach a certain level of that, you win the game. It's a fun strategy, you know, it's nice to work with multiple routes. With TCGs, I always find that they are a little bit more of a mono win condition. Usually you will just have your main win condition, which will be either depleting your opponent of their shields, subtracting them of all of their life points, or gaining so many victory points, something along those lines. And then the one alternate win condition will be like deck milling, like White Swan has mentioned, because if your game is surpassing that point of you've used all your cards, you've kind of completed that session of the game. I mean, there's not really much more you can do. The exception, I would say, is Flesh and Blood. You don't automatically finish the game when you run out of cards. You can still see out your game. So they've taken the rule and made it a little bit different. But for most TCGs, it is usually a good finishing point. If you have ran out of cards before your opponent, you will naturally lose the game. Now, if anybody can think of other alternate win conditions that are in trading card games, please let me know, because I mostly know alternate win conditions from things like video games and board games, but not very much with trading card games. So that would be some very useful information. Thank you very much. Oh, and while you're scrolling down that way, don't forget to hit the like button. You know, it's just on the way down anyway, so it will be quite convenient. Thank you. Now, Captain DC has commented, I want the ability to adjust the randomness of my game. For instance, there is a spell card that deals 3 damage to any enemy or player. You may cast the spell at a reduced cost if you let one of the 3 damage get chosen randomly for you. This gives you multiple strategic plays for what should be a simple effect. Of course, the trade-off is that sometimes it doesn't hit the target that you thought it would, but you are the one who chose that effect, so you can't really be mad. Now, I responded to this by saying that's a good way of making a card a silly fun random card and also a viable meta card, depending on how and when you choose to play it. If you have the option to go down the random route or go down the risk-free skilled route, then in a way you are satisfying both types of players. Players who enjoy fun, excitement, randomness, and players who enjoy hardcore stats and strategy. But usually I would recommend that these two effects remain on different cards, and that is because Mark Rosewater, the lead designer of Magic the Gathering, says that if you try to make everybody happy, you usually make nobody happy. So maybe a Timmy might see that card as to be too spiky, and the Spike might see that card as too Timmy. But at the same time, I feel like it breaks the rule because you can use it one way or the other. It's just a card with more variety. So on paper, I say this is a fun, unique gimmick and I could see it doing well, but something tells me that the Spikes aren't going to like it and the Timmys aren't going to like it. Which is why when we're making a game, we always have to play test, play test, play test. Now, Intro to Love has commented, innovative mechanics like placing cards upon each other and the top one getting the lower card's ability. Now, when I see this, I just think Digimon. The whole idea of Digimon is you digivolve on top of each other and you get the inherited ability. So your Digivolution line decides what your newest card's inherited abilities are. Now, I love this mechanic. It's a fun, unique mechanic. But what I would be cautious about is complexity creep with this. If you get a large Digivolution line, then you have a lot of effects to go through, and this can slow down gameplay. I still think it is good gameplay, but you always have to be a little bit cautious of gameplay slowing down. So if you are making a game with this type of model, make sure to keep the effects very, very simple. Almost boring, in fact. But when they all interact off each other, the combination of basic simple effects compounds the complexity within your game very, very quickly. Now, Drago Jess has said a large variety of card types like Yu-Gi-Oh! With its extra deck or Magic the Gathering. I like that it creates an inherent gameplay variety with how certain decks focus on certain card types, or all of them. So I'm not sure if they're referring specifically to like archetypes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because there are so many different kinds. You've got so much variety that way. I know in Magic the Gathering you have many card types. Just looking at human characters, you have like human wizard, human knight, human warrior, and lots of different kinds, and that is just humans. And then of course you have their more unique designs like the Eldrazi's, and then you've got classic dragons and goblins, and there are so many different types of cards. So they always say variety is the spice of life, but if you are making your own card game, I would be careful with how much variety you add to your game at first. So what I would recommend for the solo creator is keep it simple, okay? Slowly incorporate additional types to keep the game interesting, but don't try to overreach. Don't say to yourself, I'm going to create a brand new TCG and it is going to have 40 different creature types and it's going to be amazing and everybody's going to look at it and go, wow, what an expansive game. Because if you do that, you are dividing your attention between 40 different types. Where if you just pick 4 or 5 types, you can show them some real love. And if you put that love into those 4 or 5 different types, then people will see that love, they'll see that effort, and they're more likely to play your game. In your future sets, you can start to add 1 or 2 more types, which is quite exciting for new players as well, because if you've done such a good job with the first ones, I'm sure they will appreciate the next ones. Okay, so Generatorus Vargas 5513, I don't think I've said that name correctly, has said putting enemy units under our units and gaining their power, or stuff like that. Equip. So they've used as like a key word, I suppose. Now, when I see this, I think of Card Fight Vanguard, where you would have the Vanguard and then you have the Rear Guard, which empowers the Vanguard. Of course, I'm sure there are lots of other TCGs that have some form of this as well. So if you can think of any, don't forget to put them in the comment section because it points me in the right direction. It educates me a little bit further, and then I am more equipped for future videos just like this one. So that would be very helpful. Thank you. Now, I like this gimmick because I love the feeling of progression in a card game. And sometimes you don't want to give up what you started with. So if you start off with a basic card and you can power it up, it feels like you've just imparted this power onto that card. That card is deadly because of your influence. Where if you simply just play a more powerful card, perhaps it doesn't feel as much of an influence. I'm not sure if that makes sense to other players, but I get that feeling. You know, I love to use equip cards. When I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I loved using like the Axe of Despair on the card and boosting it by 1,000. A card that never looked like too much of a threat was suddenly 1,000 points stronger, and it was excellent. It gave me a really good feeling. So if anybody has those types of feelings, feel free to share them with me as well, whether it was in Yu-Gi-Oh or another TCG. Now, Resandra Rexia has said, when each card has a max of 1 or 2 effects, allows for better deck design and more design room for devs. Which is good. I mean, I suppose it is more of a design choice than a gimmick, I suppose. It's a rule that the devs have put on. It's not something, a unique gimmick to a TCG, but it's something that we shouldn't forget. It is so easy to overcomplicate a card, and you have to remember that a trading card has very limited space. So you have to make sure that you don't get carried away with that. Now, even though I wouldn't classify this as a gimmick, I think Race Andrexia is onto something, and it's nice to get a little reminder every now and then about this. So thank you. Okay, so Revin Fadley 4666 says the energy system in Chrono Clash type games. Now, Chrono Clash, the way their energy system works is you're moving the gauge from one end to the other. So the more cards that you play, it moves closer to the number 1. If it surpasses the number 1 and goes into your opponent's energy, then it is then their turn, and they can use that energy that you've overspent to then play their game. So then it's just like a pendulum type game, you know, the more I swing on one way, the more you can swing back, and it kind of creates a momentum style of play. Now, do I think this is the best style of energy system in a game? No, but I don't believe that there is a best style of energy system in a game. So let's be fair there. I think it is a very good style, and it creates a different type of gameplay. It means that if you are stuck on a low energy, you always have the option to still play very powerful cards. You are just giving more energy to your opponent, which means they can do more back to you, which is why I mentioned the pendulum, you know. So I don't have much momentum, but if I do a big swing your way, you're going to be able to swing back, and it's probably going to hit me pretty hard. So it encourages you to try and play as little as you can to not give your opponent too much, but when you are ready to go for it, you can do one massive swing. So I do like that style of play, and if you can make a game around that, I would very much recommend it, because it is a fun and interesting strategy, which is quite different to other TCGs. Now, Connor O'Malley says borderline toxic stall strategies. Fossil Mr. Mime level damage prevention. So obviously they've got a Pokemon one as an example. I'm just going to look it up now. I can't find the Fossil Mr. Mime one with the symbol on it. I've got the plant symbol, not like the fossil claw symbol, but I think it's the same Mr. Mime. So Pokemon Power Invisible Wall. Whenever an attack, including your own, does 30 or more damage to Mr. Mime after applying weakness and resistance, prevent that damage. So yes, anything that is too strong stops the damage completely, and I get how that can be a toxic stall strategy. I see that more as a unique card effect rather than a TCG gimmick. But could you imagine a TCG that was actually completely based around this sort of toxic play strategy, where I am constantly just preventing you from progressing in the game, which is very frustrating for the opponent. Normally, if you have a player that enjoys that sort of gameplay, they need a different type of player that enjoys a more offensive gameplay, because you want to stall their offensive strategy. But this is why we are all unique. Some of us like to be heavy hit attackers, some of us like to be laid back strategists, some of us like to be stone walls, you can't get past me, frustration types, and some of us like to be sneak around the back card milling type of players. And if you focus on just one of these strategies within your TCG, you are then cutting off a huge portion of your potential player base. So make sure that you try to incorporate a little bit of everything, just so you can be inclusive. Now, Dapper Deceased says, declaring actions. I get to be dramatic with my friends. Now, when I see this, I don't think of this as a gimmick, but it does remind me of Magic the Gathering's Unseries, which I suppose is a fun little gimmick, where you're using silly little rules, and I'll have to bring up an example. Right, so here is an example. We have Cheaty Face. You may sneak Cheaty Face into play at any time without paying for it, but if an opponent catches you right away, that player may remove Cheaty Face from the game. And it also has flying. So this is a good example of being dramatic in a game, because if you ever catch it, you would be like, well, that is Cheaty Face, you get it out. You know? And this is important because you are encouraging players to express emotion in a trading card game. A game where quite often you are sitting there silently plodding, trying not to listen to the other player because you are trying to work out which order of cards you play things in the right order to get things working correctly. And it's a good gimmick to incorporate in your game in some shape or form. So I just want to thank everybody who commented with their favourite gimmick, and I am sorry that I didn't get to read everybody out, but with so many comments it would be such a long video. I also just want to add that I love the back and forth that we have with the community when I can propose questions like this and I get so much information back to bounce off of. It is fantastic and you are all amazing. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I hope to see you next time. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. I've been James. Goodbye.